Attention, drivers coming in. Over.
There's a sketch lost in the archives of Munich, drawn on yellowed paper in 1916, when the world was tearing itself apart. A circle with 4 quadrants. Simple, elegant, forever. The man who drew it had no idea he was designing eternity. What is it about a machine that makes us dream? What transforms cold metal into something that stirs the soul? Tonight, we journey through a century of precision, passion, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. This is the story of BMW. Not just a company, but a philosophy made manifest in steel and leather, in the whisper of wind over a perfectly sculpted hood. Some brands sell cars, others sell dreams. But there's something deeper here, something that transcends the mechanical. A spirit that began with aircraft engines in wartime Munich and evolved into the ultimate driving machine. Tonight, you'll discover how 3 letters became synonymous with the very essence of motion itself. If you enjoy cinematic sleep documentaries like this, make sure to subscribe and tap the bell. Now take a deep breath, full screen this video, dim your lights, and let yourself drift into sleep as this story unfolds. Let the gentle rhythm of this tale carry you away, as we explore the soul of a machine that dared to call itself the ultimate driving machine. In the autumn of 1916, as the Great War raged across Europe, 2 companies merged in the industrial heart of Bavaria. Bayerische Flugzeugwerk, Bavarian Aircraft Works, joined forces with another aviation company, creating something new, something that would outlive the very war that birthed it. The circular logo was not yet blue and white. That would come later, born from the colors of the Bavarian flag, though legend would later whisper it represented a spinning propeller against the sky. Truth is often more beautiful than myth, but both have their place in this story. Karl Rapp, the founder, was a dreamer of flight. Born in 1882 in Ehrenfeld, Rapp possessed the kind of mechanical intuition that could hear imperfection in the whisper of a bearing, feel imbalance in the tremor of an engine mount. His engines powered the aircraft that soared above the trenches, delivering letters from lovers, carrying hopes across battlefields. The BMW 3A engine, developed in 1917, was revolutionary, lighter, more powerful, more reliable than anything the competition could produce. Picture those early workshops in Munich's Milbertshofen district. Concrete floors stained with oil, the acrid smell of metal shavings, the rhythmic hammering of craftsmen shaping aluminum by hand. Windows tall enough to let in Bavaria's pale winter light, casting long shadows across workbenches, where precision was measured not in thousandths of an inch, but in the steady hands and experienced eyes of master mechanics. Franz Josef Popp, the man who would truly father BMW, understood that excellence was not an accident, but a discipline. Every component was tested beyond its expected limits. Every assembly was inspected by multiple sets of eyes. The BMW aircraft engines didn't just meet specifications, they exceeded them so consistently that pilots began requesting them specifically. But when the armistice was signed in 1918, the Treaty of Versailles forbade Germany from manufacturing aircraft engines. The company that was born to conquer the skies was suddenly grounded. Imagine the silence in those workshops, machines built for motion, sitting idle, craftsmen whose skills had touched the heavens, suddenly earthbound. What does a company do when its very purpose is outlawed? It reinvents itself, slowly, carefully, like a tree that grows around the stone that blocks its path. They began with railway brakes. The transition was not as strange as it might seem. Both applications required precision manufacturing, reliable operation under stress, the ability to stop something moving at high speed. The BMW brake systems were installed on trains throughout Germany, each one a small testament to the company's refusal to compromise on quality. Then came farm equipment, air compressors, office furniture, anything that could employ the skilled workforce and utilize the precision machinery that had once built engines for the sky. The company that would become BMW was learning patience, learning to wait for its moment to soar again. In the company's archives, letters from this period survive correspondence between Popp and his engineers. discussing not just immediate survival, but long-term vision. They knew this was temporary. They were preparing for something greater, something that would carry the spirit of flight, even if it could never leave the ground. Max Frez joined the company in 1917, bringing with him an understanding of engines that bordered on mystical. He could design a power plant by feel, intuiting the flow of gases through ports, the harmonics of reciprocating masses, the subtle art of extracting maximum power from minimum displacement. Frez would become BMW's chief engineer, the man who would translate the company's aviation expertise into automotive excellence. By 1923, the restrictions were loosening. Germany was slowly being welcomed back into the community of nations, and with that came the opportunity to build engines again. But now BMW had learned something valuable: adaptability. The company that emerged from this dark period was stronger, more resourceful, more determined than the one that had entered it. The first BMW motorcycle rolled out of the Munich factory in 1923. The R32, a name that meant nothing to the world but would echo through decades. It was elegant in its simplicity, revolutionary in its engineering. The flat twin engine, the shaft drive, innovations that would become the heartbeat of BMW motorcycles for the next century. Max Frez, the chief engineer, had hands that could feel the vibration of imperfection. Every bolt, every gasket, every carefully machined surface had to sing in harmony. This was not just manufacturing, this was orchestration. The R32's engine was mounted longitudinally in the frame, its cylinders jutting out into the cooling airstream, like the wings of some mechanical bird. The design was so fundamentally sound that BMW motorcycles would follow this configuration for the next 100 years. Picture the test rides through the Bavarian countryside. Rolling hills dotted with medieval castles, narrow roads that twisted through dark forests where sunlight filtered through ancient pines. The R32 was more than transportation. It was freedom made manifest. A machine that could carry its rider away from the industrial grime of Munich into landscapes that had remained unchanged for centuries. Gentle sounds of wind and distant engines. The motorcycle industry in the 1920s was primitive by modern standards. Most machines were little more than bicycles with engines strapped on, unreliable contraptions that broke down more often than they ran. But BMW approached motorcycle engineering with the same precision they had brought to aircraft engines. Every component was over-engineered, every system designed for long-term reliability. The R32's shaft drive was revolutionary. While other manufacturers used chains or belts to transfer power from engine to rear wheel, BMW employed a drive shaft enclosed in the swing arm. It was more complex, more expensive, but infinitely more reliable. A chain-driven motorcycle required constant maintenance, cleaning, lubrication, adjustment. The BMW's shaft drive was virtually maintenance-free, sealed away from dirt and weather. Rudolf Schleicher, BMW's first motorcycle test rider, became a legend in his own right. He would disappear for weeks at a time, taking prototypes on grueling journeys across Europe, pushing them to their limits on mountain passes and city streets. His reports were legendary within the company, detailed accounts of every component's performance, every weakness that needed addressing, every improvement that could be made. In 1928, BMW acquired the Dixie Car Company, and with it, the license to build a small car called the Austin 7. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't fast, but it was wheels on the ground, 4 cylinders firing in sequence, the beginning of something magnificent. The Dixie 315s, as BMW designated their version, was essentially a licensed copy of the Austin 7. But even in imitation, there were hints of what was to come. The build quality was superior. The attention to detail was obsessive. The engineers at BMW couldn't help themselves. They had to make it better. Walk through a BMW Dixie assembly line in 1929, and you would see the future taking shape. Workers moved with precision, each operation timed and refined. Quality control inspectors examined every component before installation. The cars that emerged were indistinguishable from Austin 7s to casual observers, but BMW owners knew the difference. Their cars started more reliably, ran more smoothly, required fewer repairs. The small car business taught BMW valuable lessons about mass production, about the economics of automobile manufacturing, about the delicate balance between cost and quality. But more importantly, it taught them about customers, about the people who would buy their cars, drive them daily, depend on them for transportation. Fritz Fiedler joined BMW in 1929, bringing with him experience from the aircraft industry and a passion for elegant engineering solutions. He would become one of BMW's most important designers, a man who understood that beauty and function were not opposites, but partners in the dance of great design. By 1929, they were designing their own cars, small steps toward greatness, each one measured, each one deliberate. The company was learning what it meant to be BMW, not just in the engines they built, but in the dreams they dared to pursue. The BMW 320s, introduced in 1932, was the company's first completely original automobile design. It shared nothing with the Austin 7, except the basic concept of a small, affordable car. The engine was BMW's own design, a 782cc four-cylinder that produced 20 horsepower. The chassis was stiffer, the suspension more sophisticated, the steering more precise. But it was in the details that BMW's aircraft heritage showed most clearly. The engine was beautifully finished, with surfaces machined to tolerances that exceeded industry standards. The electrical system was robust and reliable. The controls fell naturally to hand, positioned with the kind of ergonomic consideration that came from designing aircraft cockpits. The automotive press of the era took notice. Road tests praised the BMW's refinement, its solid construction, its surprising performance from such a small engine. More importantly, customers noticed. Sales grew steadily throughout the early 1930s, establishing BMW as a serious player in the German automotive market. Each success built upon the last. Each model taught new lessons about what customers wanted, what the market would accept, what BMW could achieve with its unique combination of precision engineering and aviation-inspired design philosophy. The company was finding its voice, discovering the character that would define it for generations to come. The BMW 328 appeared in 1936, like a comet streaking across the automotive landscape. It was beautiful, curves that seemed to flow like water, a grille that smiled with confidence. But beauty alone doesn't win races. Rudolf Caraccella first laid eyes on the 328 prototype in BMW's Munich workshops in early 1936. The legendary Mercedes driver, temporarily without a factory ride, was skeptical of this small Bavarian company's racing ambitions. But when he slipped behind the wheel for the first test drive, his expression changed. The car felt alive beneath him, responsive to every input, balanced in ways that defied its modest specifications. The 328's engine was a masterpiece of efficiency. A 2.0-liter inline-six that produced 80 horsepower might not sound impressive today, but in 1936, it was revelation. More importantly, it was the way that power was delivered, smoothly, progressively, with a soundtrack that ranged from a whisper at idle to a purposeful howl at redline. Fritz Fiedler, the 328's chief designer, had learned lessons from BMW's aircraft heritage. Weight was the enemy of performance, so every component was scrutinized for unnecessary mass. The engine block was aluminum, saving precious pounds. The body panels were hand-formed aluminum over a lightweight tubular frame. Even the spare tire was eliminated in racing trim, replaced by a tire repair kit. Atmospheric sounds of 1930s racing. At the Nürburgring in 1938, the 328 didn't just win, it dominated. First, second, third, fourth, and sixth place. The competition wasn't even close. This was the moment BMW announced itself to the world. We are not just builders of machines, we are creators of perfection. But the 328's greatest triumph came not on a racetrack but on public roads. The Mille Miglia, 1,000 miles across Italy, from Brescia to Rome and back, over mountain passes and through medieval villages. In 1940, a modified 328 driven by Huschke von Hanstein and Walter Bohmer
averaged over 100 miles per hour for the entire distance, winning the race outright against much more powerful competition. Picture that race, dawn breaking over the Italian countryside as the BMW 328 climbed into the Apennine Mountains. The engine note echoing off stone villages that had stood for centuries, the car's headlights cutting through morning mist, the drivers' faces illuminated by the green glow of the instrument panel. This was motorsport in its purest form, man and machine against time and terrain. The 328's success wasn't accidental. BMW had established a racing department with the same methodical approach they brought to production car development. Every component was tested to destruction. Every modification was carefully evaluated for its effect on the car's balance and reliability. While other manufacturers relied on raw power to win races, BMW pursued efficiency and reliability. The drivers who piloted these machines spoke of them with reverence. The steering was precise, the handling predictable yet alive. The 328 rewarded smooth inputs and punished ham-fisted driving. You didn't fight a BMW 328, you danced with it, a partnership between human intuition and mechanical perfection. Von Honstein, who would later become Porsche's legendary racing manager, never forgot his time with BMW. In interviews decades later, he would describe the 328 as the most perfectly balanced car he had ever driven. It did everything you asked of it, he said, and then it asked if you were brave enough to ask for more. The 328's influence extended far beyond the racetrack. Its advanced suspension design, with torsion bars and wishbones, would influence BMW chassis development for decades. The engine's hemispherical combustion chambers and cross-flow cylinder head became BMW design hallmarks. Even the car's proportions, long hood, short rear deck, cabin position toward the rear, established the template for BMW styling that continues today. In 1940, a modified 328 won the Mille Italy's legendary 1,000-mile race. The average speed was over 100 miles per hour across public roads, through villages, and over mountains. It was insane. It was beautiful. It was BMW announcing that it belonged among the gods of automotive engineering. Production ended in 1940, as BMW's factories were converted to wartime production. But the 328's legacy was secure. Only 462 were built, each one essentially hand-assembled by craftsmen who understood they were creating something special. Today, a BMW 328 is worth more than $1 million, not just for its rarity, but for its significance as the car that established BMW's reputation for building the ultimate driving machine. But the world was changing. War was coming again, and with it, another test of BMW's ability to adapt, to survive, to emerge stronger from the darkness. The lessons learned from the 328, that efficiency could triumph over brute force, that precision could overcome power, that the ultimate driving machine was about balance, not just speed, would survive the coming darkness and emerge to define BMW's post-war identity. The Second World War transformed BMW once again into an aircraft engine manufacturer. The company that had been forbidden to make aircraft engines after the First War now found itself producing the power plants for the Luftwaffe. History has a strange sense of irony. The BMW 801 radial engine powered the Focke-Wulf 190, one of Germany's most effective fighter aircraft. It was a technological marvel. 14 cylinders arranged in 2 rows, producing over 1,700 horsepower. But this achievement came at a terrible cost. The factories used forced labor, a dark chapter in BMW's history that the company would later acknowledge and for which it would pay reparations. By 1945, BMW's factories lay in ruins. Allied bombing had destroyed much of the Munich complex. The Eisenach plant, where the 328 had been built, found itself in the Soviet occupation zone and was lost forever. The workforce was scattered, the machinery destroyed or confiscated, the company's future uncertain. Heinrich Nordhoff, who would later transform Volkswagen into a global powerhouse, briefly considered taking over BMW's motorcycle division. But he ultimately chose Volkswagen, leaving BMW to find its own path back from the brink of extinction. But there's something about the human spirit that refuses to be broken.
The engineers at BMW began again, working with whatever materials they could find. Aluminum was scarce, so they used steel. Chrome was unavailable, so they painted. Rubber was rationed, so they improvised. The first post-war BMWs were built from necessity, not luxury. The BMW R24 motorcycle, introduced in 1948, marked the company's return to production. It was a simple machine, a single-cylinder engine, basic suspension, minimal amenities, but it ran. And in post-war Germany, that was enough. The R24 gave BMW the cash flow it needed to survive, to plan for something greater. In 1955, BMW faced a crisis that nearly ended the company forever. The bubble car era had begun, and BMW's response was the Isetta, a tiny egg-shaped vehicle with a single front door and 3 wheels. It was not a beautiful car by BMW standards. It was practical, economical, almost comical with its front opening door and 245cc motorcycle engine. Picture the Isetta in the context of 1950s Europe. Cities still bore the scars of war, rationing was still in effect, and gasoline was expensive. The Isetta could seat 2 adults, achieve 94 miles per gallon, and park in spaces too small for conventional cars. It was transportation reduced to its essence, the minimum viable car for maximum mobility. The Isetta saved BMW from bankruptcy, but it also represented everything the company didn't want to be. This was survival, not success. The engineers who had created the magnificent 328 were now building what critics called a refrigerator on wheels. It was humbling, but it was necessary. Simultaneously, BMW was developing something that would restore its reputation for building beautiful, desirable automobiles. The BMW 507 Roadster, revealed at the Frankfurt Motor Show in 1955, was BMW's declaration that it was back. If the Isetta was survival, the 507 was resurrection. The 507 was gorgeous, long, low, with curves that seemed to flow like silk. The body was aluminum, hand-formed by craftsmen who remembered how to shape metal with hammers and English wheels. The V8 engine produced 150 horsepower, enough to propel the car to 140 miles per hour. Only 252 were ever built, each one a masterpiece of craftsmanship. Count Albrecht von Goertz, the 507's designer, understood that BMW needed a halo car, a machine that would remind the world that the company could still build objects of desire. The 507 was too expensive, too exclusive for commercial success, selling for twice the price of a Mercedes-Benz 300 SL. But it served a different purpose. It reminded the world that BMW was still capable of greatness. Elvis Presley owned a 507, painted white to match his flamboyant style. He drove it while stationed in Germany during his military service, and photos of the young Elvis behind the wheel of the beautiful BMW became iconic images of 1950s glamour. The car survived and was eventually restored by BMW Classic, a rolling testament to the company's artistic heritage. The 507 was a commercial failure, but a psychological success. It proved to BMW's engineers that they hadn't lost their ability to create beauty, that the company could still build cars that stirred the soul as well as providing transportation. More importantly, it demonstrated to the world that BMW was not just the maker of bubble cars and motorcycles. It was still a serious manufacturer of sporting automobiles. The late 1950s brought new hope and new challenges. The German economy was recovering rapidly, and consumers were beginning to demand more than basic transportation. BMW recognized that its future lay not in bubble cars or expensive exotics, but in something between these extremes, cars that combined BMW's sporting heritage with everyday practicality. The lessons of the survival years were harsh but valuable. BMW had learned to be resourceful, to do more with less, to find innovative solutions to seemingly impossible problems. The company that emerged from the 1950s was leaner, more focused, more determined than ever to build the ultimate driving machine. The company was ready for its next chapter, ready to build not just cars, but legends that would define automotive excellence for generations to come. The 1960s began with BMW on the brink of bankruptcy. The Isetta had saved the company from immediate collapse, but bubble cars were not the future. The 507 had restored prestige, but sold too few units to matter financially. BMW needed something new, something that would define its character for generations to come. The answer came from an unlikely source, a sketch drawn on a restaurant napkin by Wilhelm Hofmeister, BMW's head of design. The drawing showed a sedan with proportions unlike anything on the market, a long hood, short rear deck, and a distinctive crease that ran from the front wheel arch to the rear of the car. This sketch would become the BMW 1500, the car that saved the company and invented an entire new automotive category. The BMW 1500, launched in 1962, changed everything. It wasn't the most beautiful BMW ever built, nor the fastest, but it was revolutionary in ways that only became clear years later. This was the car that invented the sports sedan, the machine that proved luxury and performance could coexist with practicality. Alex von Falkenhausen, the engine designer, created what would become BMW's signature power plant, a twin-cam four-cylinder that produced smooth, progressive power. The engine was over-square, with a bore larger than its stroke, allowing it to rev freely and produce power throughout its range. More importantly, it had character, a distinctive sound that announced this was something special. The new class, as it became known, was BMW's declaration of independence. No longer would the company build tiny economy cars or prohibitively expensive exotics. They would create a new category, cars for people who loved driving but needed 4 doors and a trunk. The 1500's engine was a marvel of engineering efficiency. 2 liters, twin overhead cams, 130 horsepower. But more than the numbers was the character, smooth, responsive, eager to rev. It was an engine that invited you to explore its limits, to discover the joy of perfectly matched gears and precisely calibrated throttle response. The interior of the new class cars was driver-focused in ways that seem obvious today, but were revolutionary in 1962. The dashboard wrapped around the driver, the controls fell naturally to hand. The seating position provided excellent visibility in all directions. This was the beginning of BMW's philosophy that the driver was the most important component in the automotive system. Paul Bracq, who joined BMW's design team in 1970, refined the new class aesthetic into something approaching perfection. His work on the later models in the series, the 1800, 2000, and ultimately the 2002, created the visual language that would define BMW for decades. Clean lines, purposeful stance, details that served function rather than decoration. The success of the new class cars allowed BMW to expand its model range and establish proper dealer networks around the world. By 1966, BMW was exporting to the United States, where American drivers discovered that there was an alternative to the crude muscle cars that dominated the performance market. But it was the arrival of the 02 series in 1966 that truly established BMW's reputation in America. The 1602, and later the legendary 2002, were smaller, lighter, more focused than the 4-door new class sedans. They were the cars that taught America what a BMW could be: compact, nimble, beautifully engineered machines that made driving a pleasure rather than a chore. The BMW 2002 became an icon almost by accident. It was intended as a smaller, cheaper alternative to the 4-door 1600 sedan, but customers immediately recognized it as something special. The proportions were perfect, just large enough to be practical, just small enough to be nimble. The 2-door configuration gave it a sporty appearance that the 4-door sedans couldn't match. Road and Track magazine tested the 2002 in 1968 and declared it the most enjoyable car in its class. Car and Driver called it the best small sedan in the world. But more importantly, ordinary drivers fell in love with it. The 2002 was fast enough to be exciting but civilized enough for daily use, sophisticated enough to satisfy enthusiasts, but simple enough to be reliable. The 2002 Turbo, introduced in 1973, was BMW's first turbocharged production car. With 170 horsepower from its 2.0-liter engine, it was faster than most sports cars of the era, capable of accelerating from 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 8 seconds. But more importantly, it was civilized, a car you could drive to work on Monday and to the racetrack on Saturday. The Turbo's development was not without controversy. The distinctive graphics package, with 2002 Turbo written in reverse across the front spoiler, was criticized as flashy and un-BMW-like. But the car's performance was undeniable, and it established BMW's credibility in the high-performance market. Hans Stuck, the German racing driver, became closely associated with the 2002 Turbo, using it to dominate the European Touring Car Championship. His success on the track translated to sales success in showrooms, as customers sought to buy the same car their racing hero drove. This was BMW's new philosophy taking shape, the ultimate driving machine. Not the fastest, not the most luxurious, but the most complete. Cars that understood that driving was not just about getting from point A to point B, but about the journey itself. The new class cars established templates that BMW would follow for decades: rear-wheel drive for perfect balance, inline engines for smoothness and character, driver-focused interiors for engagement, and proportions that emphasized function over fashion. Every BMW built since 1962 can trace its ancestry back to that sketch on a restaurant napkin. The foundation was laid. Now it was time to build the temple that would house BMW's greatest creation, a car that would become synonymous with driving excellence itself. It was revolutionary in ways that only became clear years later. This was the car that invented the sports sedan, the machine that proved luxury and performance could coexist with practicality. Soft engine sounds, refined and measured. The new class, as it became known, was BMW's declaration of independence. No longer would the company build tiny economy cars or prohibitively expensive exotics. They would create a new category, cars for people who loved driving but needed 4 doors and a trunk. The 1500s engine was a marvel of engineering efficiency. 2 liters, fuel injection, 130 horsepower. But more than the numbers was the character. Smooth, responsive, eager to rev. It was an engine that invited you to explore its limits, to discover the joy of perfectly matched gears and precisely calibrated throttle response. In 1966, BMW added the 02 series to the new class family. The 1602 and later the legendary 2002 were smaller, lighter, more focused. They were the cars that taught America what a BMW could be: compact, nimble, beautifully engineered machines that made driving a pleasure rather than a chore. The 2002 Turbo, introduced in 1973, was BMW's first turbocharged production car. It was faster than most sports cars of the era. But more importantly, it was civilized, a car you could drive to work on Monday and to the racetrack on Saturday. This was BMW's new philosophy taking shape, the ultimate driving machine. Not the fastest, not the most luxurious, but the most complete. Cars that understood that driving was not just about getting from point A to point B, but about the journey itself. The new class cars established templates that BMW would follow for decades. Rear-wheel drive for perfect balance, inline engines for smoothness and character, driver-focused interiors for engagement, and proportions that emphasized function over fashion. Every BMW built since 1962 can trace its ancestry back to that sketch on a restaurant napkin. The foundation was laid. Now it was time to build the temple that would house BMW's greatest creation, a car that would become synonymous with driving excellence itself. It was revolutionary in ways that only became clear years later. This was the car that invented the sports sedan, the machine that proved luxury and performance could coexist with practicality. The new class, as it became known, was BMW's declaration of independence. No longer would the company build tiny economy cars or prohibitively expensive exotics. They would create a new category: cars for people who loved driving but needed 4 doors and a trunk. The 1500's engine was a marvel of engineering efficiency. 2 liters, fuel injection, 130 horsepower. But more than the numbers was the character. Smooth, responsive, eager to rev. It was an engine that invited you to explore its limits, to discover the joy of perfectly matched gears and precisely calibrated throttle response. In 1966, BMW added the 02 series to the new class family, the 1600 now 2, and later the legendary 2002, were smaller, lighter, more focused. They were the cars that taught America what a BMW could be: compact, nimble, beautifully engineered machines that made driving a pleasure rather than a chore. The 2002 Turbo, introduced in 1973, was BMW's first turbocharged production car. It was fast, faster than most sports cars of the era. But more importantly, it was civilized. A car you could drive to work on Monday and to the racetrack on Saturday. This was BMW's new philosophy taking shape: the ultimate driving machine. Not the fastest, not the most luxurious, but the most complete cars that understood that driving was not just about getting from point A to point B, but about the journey itself. The foundation was laid. Now it was time to build the temple. In 1975, BMW introduced the car that would define the brand for generations to come. The E21 3 Series was sleek, purposeful, perfectly proportioned. It looked fast standing still, and it delivered on that promise when the key was turned. The heart of the new 3 Series was BMW's inline-6 engine, smooth, powerful, with a soundtrack that ranged from a whisper at idle to a purposeful growl under acceleration. This engine would become BMW's signature, the sound that announced the arrival of something special. But the 3 Series was more than just an engine. It was a complete automotive experience, engineered from the ground up to deliver what BMW called driving pleasure. The steering was precise without being nervous, the suspension firm but not harsh, the interior focused on the driver without being Spartan. The automotive press didn't know what to make of it at first. It was too expensive to be an economy car, too small to be a luxury car, too refined to be a sports car. BMW had created something new, a car that was all of these things, and none of them, a machine that transcended traditional categories. In 1982, the second-generation E33 series arrived, and with it came perfection. The proportions were flawless: long hood, short rear deck, greenhouse that seemed to float above the body. It was beautiful in the way that only truly functional design can be beautiful. The E30 M3, introduced in 1986, was the 3 Series taken to its logical extreme. Wider fenders, aggressive aerodynamics, a 4-cylinder engine that screamed to 7,000 revolutions per minute. It won touring car championships around the world, but more importantly, it established BMW M as the performance division that could build cars to compete with anyone, anywhere. The 3 Series became BMW's best seller, the car that funded the company's expansion into larger sedans and sports cars. But it was more than a commercial success. It was proof that BMW's philosophy worked, that there was a market for cars built for people who truly loved driving. While the 3 Series was conquering the compact sedan market, BMW was preparing an assault on the luxury car establishment. The 7 Series, launched in 1977, was BMW's answer to Mercedes-Benz's dominance in the premium sedan segment. The E23 7 Series was everything a BMW should be, scaled up for the boardroom crowd. It was fast, beautifully built, and laden with technology that wouldn't appear in other cars for years. Electronic fuel injection, anti-lock brakes, onboard computers. The 7 Series was a glimpse into the automotive future. But BMW wasn't content to simply match Mercedes-Benz's luxury credentials. The 7 Series had to be more than just opulent. It had to be engaging to drive. Even with its substantial size and weight, the The 7 Series retained the BMW character, the sense that this was a driver's car first and a luxury car second. In 1981, BMW introduced the 5 Series, slotting between the 3 and 7 Series, to complete the sedan lineup. The E28 5 Series was the Goldilocks car, not too small, not too large, but just right for executives who wanted prestige without ostentation. The 5 Series embodied BMW's maturing philosophy perfectly. It was refined without being soft, powerful without being crude, luxurious without being excessive. It was a car for people who had achieved success but still remembered what it felt like to carve corners on a mountain road. By the mid-1980s, BMW had established itself as a legitimate alternative to Mercedes-Benz and other luxury marques, but they had done so without compromising their core identity. These were still drivers' cars, still machines, built for people who understood that the journey was as important as the destination. In 1978, BMW did something unexpected. They built a supercar. Not just any supercar, but one that would redefine what a supercar could be. The BMW M1 was unlike anything that had come before. Mid-engined, wedge-shaped, blindingly fast, yet somehow still recognizably BMW. The M1's development was troubled from the start. Originally conceived as a racing car to compete in Group 5 motorsport, it became caught in a web of regulations, politics, and commercial considerations. Lamborghini was contracted to build the cars, then wasn't. The project almost died several times, but when the M1 finally emerged, it was worth the wait. The body, designed by 𝐤𝐢𝐬𝐿, was a masterpiece of aerodynamic efficiency and visual drama. Sharp angles and clean lines created a car that looked fast even when parked, a machine that seemed to have been carved from a single block of aluminum. The engine was pure BMW, a twin-cam inline-6 that produced 277 horsepower and redlined at 6,500 revolutions per minute. It was smooth, responsive, and utterly reliable. While other supercars of the era were temperamental prima donnas, the M1 could be driven every day, in any weather, by anyone with a valid driver's license. Only 453 M1s were built between 1978 and 1981. Each one was essentially hand-assembled, a rolling testament to BMW's engineering capabilities. The M1 proved that BMW could build cars to compete with Ferrari and Lamborghini, but it also demonstrated that BMW's approach was fundamentally different, more practical, more reliable, more usable. The M1 was BMW's statement of intent, proof that the company could build anything it set its mind to. It was also the beginning of BMW M's reputation as builders of supercar fast machines that could be driven like ordinary cars. The late 1980s and 1990s were BMW's golden age. The company had perfected its formula, sophisticated engineering wrapped in elegant design, sold to customers who valued substance over flash. The cars from this era would become legends. The E34 5 Series, launched in 1987, was perhaps the most perfectly balanced sedan ever built. It was beautiful without being showy, fast without being intimidating, luxurious without being ostentatious. The M5 version, with its 315 horsepower inline-6, was possibly the greatest sports sedan of all time. In 1990, BMW revealed the E36 3 Series, a car that would define the 1990s for enthusiast drivers. It was larger than its predecessor, but somehow more elegant, more refined. The handling was sublime, perfectly balanced, utterly predictable, endlessly entertaining. But the real revelation was the BMW 8 Series, introduced in 1989. This was BMW's grand touring car, a machine designed to cover vast distances at high speed in absolute comfort. The E31 8 Series was gorgeous, low, wide, with pop-up headlights and a greenhouse that seemed to wrap around the occupants like a fighter jet's canopy. The 850e's V12 engine was BMW's first production 12-cylinder since the 1960s. It was smooth beyond belief, producing 300 horsepower so effortlessly that you barely noticed the acceleration until you looked at the speedometer. This was speed without drama, power without compromise. The 8 Series was never a commercial success. It was too expensive, too exclusive, too uncompromising for mass appeal. But it established BMW as a builder of world-class grand touring cars, machines that could run with the best from Italy or Britain. By the end of the 1990s, BMW had established itself as one of the world's premier automotive manufacturers. The company had mastered every segment it entered, from compact sedans to luxury GT. But the biggest challenges were still ahead. The turn of the millennium brought new pressures for BMW. Environmental regulations were tightening, fuel economy standards were rising, and customers were beginning to demand more from their cars than just performance and luxury. BMW's response was characteristically innovative. The E46 3 Series, launched in 1998, was BMW's answer to the changing market. It was more refined than its predecessor, more efficient, safer, and cleaner. But it hadn't lost the essential BMW character. It was still a joy to drive, still a car that rewarded skill and enthusiasm. BMW's first SUV, the X5, arrived in 1999 and immediately redefined what a sport utility vehicle could be. While other SUVs were truck-based compromises, the X5 was designed from the ground up as a BMW. It handled like a sedan, accelerated like a sports car, and could traverse terrain that would stop a conventional car. The controversial E65 7 Series, introduced in 2001, polarized opinions with its radical styling. Chris Bangle's flame surfacing design language was unlike anything BMW had done before. Bold, angular, definitely not evolutionary. The public reaction was mixed, but the 7 Series represented BMW's willingness to take risks, to push boundaries. Inside, the 7 Series pioneered BMW's iDrive system, a revolutionary interface that controlled most of the car's functions through a single rotary controller. It was complex, sometimes frustrating, but ultimately pointed toward the future of automotive interfaces. The E65 Series continued the flame surfacing theme with even more controversial styling. But beneath the divisive exterior was perhaps the most accomplished sports sedan ever built. The M5 version, with its 500 horsepower V10 engine, was a 4-door supercar that could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 4.5 seconds. The V10 was derived from BMW's Formula One engine, a naturally aspirated unit that revved to 8,250 revolutions per minute and produced one of the greatest automotive soundtracks ever recorded. It was complex, expensive, and completely impractical, and absolutely magnificent. BMW was adapting to the new century, embracing technology and environmental responsibility, while maintaining its core identity as the ultimate driving machine. The 2008 financial crisis forced every automaker to reconsider their priorities. For BMW, it accelerated a transformation that had already begun, the move toward electrification and sustainable mobility. The BMW i3, launched in 2013, was BMW's first mass-production electric vehicle. It was radical in every way: carbon fiber body, recycled interior materials, suicide doors, and a design that looked like nothing else on the road. The i3 was BMW's vision of urban mobility, a car designed specifically for city driving. The i8, introduced the same year, was even more revolutionary. It combined a tiny 3-cylinder gasoline engine with electric motors to create a hybrid supercar that delivered both performance and efficiency. The butterfly doors and futuristic styling made it look like a concept car that had escaped from an auto show. But BMW didn't abandon its traditional strengths while pursuing electrification. The F33 series, launched in 2012, was larger and more refined than its predecessor, while maintaining the dynamic excellence that made BMW famous. The current M3, with its twin-turbocharged inline-six, was faster than the V8-powered previous generation, while using less fuel. Turbocharging became BMW's solution to the performance efficiency equation. The new engines were smaller but more powerful, cleaner but still characterful. A 2.0-liter four-cylinder in the 328i produced more power than the 3.0-liter inline-six it replaced, while using 20% less fuel. The X1, X3, X5, and X6 established BMW as a leader in the luxury SUV market. These weren't just tall sedans, they were genuine BMWs that happened to sit higher off the ground. The X6, with its coupe-like roofline, created an entirely new market segment. BMW was proving that environmental responsibility and driving pleasure weren't mutually exclusive, that the future could be both sustainable and exciting. Today, BMW stands at another crossroads. The i4, iX, and other electric models represent the company's commitment to a zero-emission future, but they're still unmistakably BMWs. The i4 M50, for instance, produces 536 horsepower and accelerates from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 3.7 seconds. Performance that would have been unimaginable in a BMW sedan just a decade ago. The iX flagship SUV showcases BMW's vision of luxury in the electric age. The interior is minimalist but warm, dominated by a curved display that stretches across the dashboard. The materials are sustainable but premium, the technology advanced but intuitive. It's a BMW for the age of artificial intelligence and renewable energy. But BMW hasn't forgotten its heritage. The new M3 and M4, with their controversial oversized grilles, are faster than ever. The M5 CS is a 627 horsepower four-door supercar that can lap the Nürburgring faster than most dedicated sports cars. These are machines that honor BMW's past while embracing its future. The upcoming i7 electric sedan will be BMW's flagship, a car designed to compete with the best luxury sedans in the world while producing zero local emissions. It represents the convergence of everything BMW has learned about luxury, technology, and sustainable mobility. BMW's autonomous driving technology, tested in fleets around the world, points toward a future where cars might drive themselves. But even in that future, BMW promises that the driver will always have the option to take control, to experience the joy of driving that has defined the brand for over a century. From aircraft engines to electric motors, from the 328 Roadster to the iX SUV, BMW has never stopped evolving. But through all the changes, one thing has remained constant: the pursuit of the ultimate driving machine. What makes a machine transcend its mechanical nature? What transforms steel and silicon into something that stirs the human soul? BMW's story is not just about horsepower and torque figures, about quarterly earnings and market share. It's about the people who dreamed of flight and translated that dream into motion on the ground. It's about engineers who couldn't accept good enough, who pursued perfection with the dedication of monks pursuing enlightenment. In a world increasingly dominated by screens and algorithms, BMW's cars remain analog experiences in digital bodies. The steering wheel still connects directly to the driver's intentions. The accelerator pedal still unleashes carefully controlled explosions. The brake pedal still harnesses physics to convert motion into heat. These are more than transportation devices. They are instruments of freedom, machines that expand the boundaries of human experience. They connect us to the road, to the landscape, to the pure joy of movement through space. Every BMW carries within it
the DNA of that first sketch in 1916, the circular logo that has remained unchanged for over a century. It carries the heritage of aircraft engines that lifted men into the sky, of racing cars that conquered the world's greatest circuits, of innovations that pushed the entire automotive industry forward. But perhaps most importantly, every BMW carries the promise that tomorrow's journey will be more engaging than today's, that the road ahead holds discoveries waiting to be made, that the ultimate driving machine is not a destination but a direction. Somewhere tonight, in a garage in Munich or Detroit or Shanghai, an engineer is working late, pursuing a solution to a problem that doesn't yet exist, perfecting a detail that only a few will ever notice. The pursuit continues, as it has for over a century, as it will for centuries to come. Somewhere, a single taillight fades into the distance, silent, confident, timeless. The ultimate driving machine, carrying its driver toward whatever lies beyond the next curve, the next hill, the next horizon. The road goes on forever, and the machine that conquers it bears the roundel of BMW, a circle that encompasses not just 4 quadrants, but all the dreams, all the innovations, all the passion that transforms metal into magic. Sleep well, dream of the road ahead.